Good morning, everyone. How are you today? I hope you are fine and welcome back to our English lesson. My name is Veasna. I am a teacher of English teaching grade 10 at Honsai Pimchikong New Generation High School. Today we are back to our English lesson and we are going to continue our Unit 7, Living History. And we are going to talk about writing a biography. So prepare your textbooks and your notebook and join me together. Before moving on to the new lesson, I just want you to see the content first. So we have 5 points. The first one review, the second one objective, the third one writing procedure, the fourth one practice, and the last one homework. Now move to the first point altogether. So I have some question to ask you. The first question is, what did you learn last week? Thank you very much. So last week you learned about living in a stately home. And another question, is there any house like Chatsworth in your community? So think about your community, think about the house in your community, and then compare it. And another question is, have you ever seen any kinds of this house anywhere? So beside your community, beside your country, have you ever seen it anywhere? Like on internet, on Facebook, on TV? Thank you very much. And the last question is about, what did you learn about living in a stately home? Okay, so we can see that the Cavendish family have lived there for over 450 years, right? And this Chatsworth house is open to the public. It needs a lot of money to support per year, and it also designed to fit the king, right? And there are many events at Chatsworth House, like exhibitions, like concerts. Okay, thank you very much. Right now we can move to another point, the objective. So by the end of the lesson, students will be able to write a biography of the people they have known well. And another one is practice reading the work they have done by swapping the work with their friends. So now move to another point. Right now, I just want you to write down the name of famous family that you know. So any family that you know, they are famous, they are popular in your country or in the world. And then think, why are they famous? And the last question is, have you ever met any of them? Okay, so think yourself about the questions and move on together. Have you ever known these people? So who are they? They are Mr. John Kennedy and his daughter, right? Okay. So today we are going to talk about two Kennedys. So I want to ask you some questions. What do you know about Mr. Kennedy? Have you ever heard anything about him? Okay, so maybe you can know some information about Mr. Kennedy, right? For example, his nationality and where he from. Okay, so now move to another point. We are talking about the life of Kennedy. So mean the life of Mr. Kennedy. So look at his picture and then imagine about his career. So do you know anything about him? Maybe he is a politician, right? Okay, let's learn about some verbs related to Mr. Kennedy. So the first is the word president, elect, បោះឆ្នោត ambassador, ឯកអគ្គរដ្ឋទូត assassinate, ធ្វើឃាត ចា៎ assassinate we use with the famous people នៅពេលដែលយើងប្រើ assassinate គឺបានតែជាមួយនឹង famous people មនុស្សល្បីល្បាញ Senate ព្រឹទ្ធសភា Space race Space race it means the competition between US and Soviet Union after World War II and during Cold War Space race គឺជាការប្រកួតប្រជែងអំពីអវកាសចា៎ការប្រកួតប្រជែងអវកាសអញ្ចឹងគឺជាការប្រកួតប្រជែងរវាងសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកហើយនិងសហភាពសូវៀតបន្ទាប់ពីសង្គ្រាមលោកលើកទី2គឺជាអំឡុងសង្គ្រាមត្រជាក់គឺមានការប្រកួតប្រជែងរវាងសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកជាមួយនឹងសហភាពសូវៀតទៅលើអវកាសហ្នឹងដែលមានទាំងការបង្ហោះផ្កាយរណបចាយានអវកាសផ្សេងៗចាទៅកាន់ភពព្រះច័ន្ទជាដើម Okay, another one is Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuban Missile Crisis វាគឺជាការប្រឈមមុខរវាងសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកហើយនិងសហភាពសូវៀតអំពីបញ្ហាគ្រាប់មីស៊ីលចានៅប្រទេសកុយបានៅក្នុងអំឡុងទសវត្សរ៍ឆ្នាំ1960 The last word is tragedy មានន័យថាសោកនាដកម្ម So I just want to read for you again and then you have to repeat after me. So let's start all together. President, elect, ambassador, assassinate, Senate, space race, Cuban Missile Crisis, tragedy. Thank you very much. So now let's move to another point. In this point, you have to read the 7 paragraphs about John Kennedy and put the paragraph in the correct order. Which word help you decide the order? So you have to read the paragraph and then you have to identify the words that help you to decide the order. ជាងយើងត្រូវអានអត្ថបទចាយើងត្រូវអានកថាខណ្ឌទាំង7ហ្នឹងហើយដាក់វាទៅតាមលំដាប់លំដោយហើយនឹងកំណត់ចំណាំថាតើពាក្យអ្វីដែលជួយឲ្យប្អូនសម្រេចចិត្តដាក់វាតាមលំដាប់លំដោយហ្នឹង So right now open your book on page 111 and read all together. So let me read for you. John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy 1917 to 1963. So we have 7 paragraphs. Let me read the paragraph A first. This was a huge tragedy for Joseph S.R., who had wanted his first son to become president. He now turned his attention to his second son, John. John wanted to please his father, and in 1952, he was elected to the U.S. Senate. U.S. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was born on May the 29th, 1917. He was the second of 9 children in a wealthy and powerful American family. His father Joseph was the U.S. ambassador to Britain, and his grandfather was the mayor of Boston. Despite all the money and fame, John's life was not easy. The following year, John joined the Navy and fought in World War II. He almost died when his boat sank in 1943. Then in 1944, his older brother Joseph Jr. was tragically killed in a military plane crash. As a child, he was often sick and had to miss months of school. However, he was a clever and popular student. His high school classmates voted him most likely to become president. He graduated from Harvard University in 1940. However, even as President tragedy continued to follow JFK, in August 1963, his son Patrick died 2 days after birth, and on November the 22nd, 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. The nation was shocked, and even today, millions of Americans remember what they were doing on that day. Around the time of John Jr.'s birth, John F. Kennedy became president. He was a popular young leader during an important time in American history. Even during his presidency included the Cuban Missile Crisis, the building of Berlin Wall, and the beginning of the space race. A year later, in 1953, he married Jacqueline Bouvier. In another tragedy, their first child died at birth in 1956. However, the couple had a daughter, Caroline, in 1957. In 1960, they had a son, John Jr. Thank you very much. So this is all our paragraph. So please decide to put it in the order. So which one is the first and what word that have you to decide like this? So we can see letter B is number 1, okay? And we can see the word was born, so mean he was born. Another word is John life was not easy, mean from the time he was born and the time he grew up, John life was not easy. So what about number 2? Which one? So number 2 is letter D, because we can see the word as a child, mean that when he was a child, and the year 1940, he was young. And what about number 3, letter C? So we can see that the following year mean ឆ្នាំបន្ទាប់ចាអញ្ចឹងឆ្នាំ1940ហើយគឺនិយាយអំពីឆ្នាំបន្ទាប់ហ្នឹង and we can see another year ហើយយើងឃើញឆ្នាំបន្ទាប់ពីឆ្នាំ1940មកគឺឆ្នាំ1943ឆ្នាំ1944ចឹងជាឆ្នាំដែលបន្តគ្នាហើយនឹងយើងឃើញពាក្យថា kill in military plane crash មានន័យថាត្រូវបានសម្លាប់នៅក្នុងឧបទ្ទវហេតុយន្តហោះ What about number 4? So letter A, as we can see that this was a huge tragedy. So we can see that John Kennedy's brother was killed in military plane crash. So it is a tragedy for Mr. Joseph, who won his first son to become president. ចឹងយើងឃើញថាឪពុករបស់លោក Kennedy ហ្នឹងបានចង់ឲ្យកូនទី1របស់គាត់ហ្នឹងក្លាយទៅជាប្រធានាធិបតីក៏ប៉ុន្តែកូនរបស់គាត់ទី1ហ្នឹងត្រូវបានស្លាប់ចានៅក្នុងឧបទ្ទវហេតុយន្តហោះដូច្នេះហើយគឺវាជាសោកនាដកម្មមួយសម្រាប់គាត់ជាងគាត់ក៏បង្វែរចំណាប់អារម្មណ៍មកលើកូនទី2របស់គាត់វិញ Okay, and another is about in 1952 he was elected to the US Senate ចឹងឆ្នាំបន្ទាប់មកគឺនៅឆ្នាំ1952គាត់ត្រូវបានគេបោះឆ្នោតឲ្យចូលឈ្មោះនៅក្នុងព្រឹទ្ធសភាអាមេរិក and number 5 letter G a year later in 1953 ចាអញ្ចឹងយើងឃើញថាឆ្នាំនេះគឺបន្តគ្នាគឺឆ្នាំ1952បន្ទាប់មកគឺឆ្នាំ1953គាត់បានរៀបការជាមួយនឹងនារីម្នាក់ចាឈ្មោះ Jacqueline Bouvier ហើយក៏ជាសោកនាដកម្មមួយទៀតដែរដែលកូនរបស់គាត់ទី1នោះគឺបានស្លាប់នៅពេលដែលកើតហើយនៅក្នុងឆ្នាំ1956បន្ទាប់មកយើងឃើញឆ្នាំបន្តទៀតគឺឆ្នាំ1957គឺគាត់មានកូនស្រីម្នាក់ទៀតហើយឆ្នាំ1960គឺគាត់មានកូនប្រុសម្នាក់ទៀតឈ្មោះថា John Jr. យើងឃើញថាទី6គឺ letter F around the time of John Jr. birth ចាយើងឃើញនៅត្រង់នេះនៅពេលដែល paragraph G ហ្នឹងគឺបាននិយាយអំពីកំណើតរបស់ John J.R. អញ្ចឹងទី6នេះបាននិយាយបន្តមកទៀតថាបន្ទាប់ពីកំណើតរបស់លោក John J.R. ហ្នឹងលោក Kennedy បានក្លាយទៅជាប្រធានាធិបតីហើយគាត់មានប្រជាប្រិយភាពយ៉ាងខ្លាំងអំឡុងពេលដែលប្រទេសអាមេរិកហ្នឹងកំពុងតែស្ថិតនៅក្នុងព្រឹត្តិការណ៍ជាច្រើនដែលព្រឹត្តិការណ៍សំខាន់រួមបញ្ចូលទាំងវិបត្តិមីស៊ីលវិបត្តិមីស៊ីលនៅកុយបាហើយនឹងការសង់ជញ្ជាំងបែកឡាំងប្រទេសអាល្លឺម៉ង់ការចែកអាល្លឺម៉ង់ជាពីរហ្នឹងហើយនឹងការចាប់ផ្ដើមនៃការប្រឡងប្រជែងអវកាសហើយចុងក្រោយគេគឺ paragraph E ពាក្យដែលយើងអាចមកជំនួយនោះគឺ however បើទោះបីជាយ៉ាងណាក៏ដោយជាប្រធានាធិបតីហ្នឹងគឺនៅតែមានសោកនាដកម្មបន្តទៀតដូចជានៅក្នុងឆ្នាំ1963កូនប្រុសរបស់គាត់ឈ្មោះថា Patrick បានស្លាប់នៅអំឡុងពេល2ថ្ងៃបន្ទាប់ពីគាត់បានកើតមកហ្នឹងហើយនៅថ្ងៃទី22ខែវិច្ឆិកាឆ្នាំ1963លោក John Kennedy ហ្នឹងត្រូវបានគេធ្វើឃាតassassinated ត្រូវបានគេធ្វើឃាតនៅក្នុងទីក្រុង Dallas រដ្ឋ Texas ហើយយើងឃើញថាជាព្រឹត្តិការណ៍មួយដែលសំខាន់ហើយគឺជាព្រឹត្តិការណ៍មួយដែលភ្ញាក់ផ្អើលខ្លាំងមែនតើតែយើងឃើញថាប្រជាជនអាមេរិកនេះគឺគាត់នៅចងចាំនៅឡើយអូខេអញ្ចឹងសម្រាប់ paragraph របស់យើងនៅក្នុង order ហ្នឹងយើងបានដាក់រួចហើយឥឡូវនេះសូមបងប្អូនអានឡើងវិញម្ដងទៀតដោយយើងអានទី1ទី2ទី3តាមលំដាប់លំដោយដោយខ្លួនឯងអរគុណអញ្ចឹងបងប្អូនបានអានរួចហើយឥឡូវនេះខ្ញុំសូមបន្តទៅមួយចំណុចទៀតតែម្ដងត្រង់ចំណុចនេះបងប្អូនអាចមើលនៅលើ slide ឬក៏នៅក្នុងសៀវភៅរបស់បងប្អូនចំណុចទី4គឺ read the note about the life of John F. Kennedy daughter Caroline use the information to write about her biography អញ្ចឹងយើងក៏លេចមកមើល note ទាំងអស់គ្នាសម្រាប់លោកស្រី Caroline Kennedy អញ្ចឹងយើងនិយាយអំពីជីវិតរបស់ត្រកូល Kennedy 2នាក់ទី1គឺលោក John F Kennedy ហើយនឹងលោកស្រី Caroline Kennedy ដែលជាកូនរបស់លោក John Kennedy អញ្ចឹងយើងមកមើល note ទាំងអស់គ្នាថាមានអ្វីខ្លះborn November the 27 1957 only surviving child of President John F Kennedy brother John F K Jr born 1960 age just 5 in 1963 her father assassinated in after father death moved from Washington to New York City with mother grew up there 1968 Uncle Robert F Kennedy also assassinated later in 1968 mother remarried great billionaire Aristotle Onassis another uncle Ted Kennedy almost died in the car crash 1979 graduated Harvard University 1980 started work in the film and TV department of the Metropolitan Museum of Art with her husband there married Edwin Schoolberg in 1986 3 children still live in New York City her mother died in 1994 age 64 has had many tragedies in her life May the 1999 brother John Jr. and his wife Caroline died in a flying accident 2008 worked with Barack Obama in the US presidential election campaign so here is the note of Caroline Kennedy so now I want you to write the paragraph about her life using all these notes. For example, Caroline was born, so we can see the year here. We can put here, Caroline was born on November the 27th, 1957. And then you can include the information. She is the only surviving child of President John F. Kennedy. Okay? Now, I give you 5 minutes to write about this. So please write it all together. So are you all ready? Very good. So I just want to see my paragraph. I have written this according to the note we have. See it and read it all together, and then you can see your text. So Caroline was born on November the 27th, 1957. She is the only surviving child of President John F. Kennedy. Her brother John Jr. was born in 1960. She was just 5 years old when her father was assassinated in 1963. After her father's death, she moved from Washington to New York City with her mother. She grew up there. In 1968, her uncle Robert Kennedy was assassinated. Later in 1968, her mother remarried to Aristotle Onassis, a great billionaire. In 1969, another uncle, Ted Kennedy, almost died in a car crash. Caroline graduated from Harvard University in 1979. She started to work in the film and TV department of Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1980. She met her husband there. She married Edwin Skolosberg in 1986, and she has 3 children. They still live in New York City. Years later, in 1994, her mother died at the age of 64. Caroline has had many tragedies in her life. On May 19, 1999, her brother John Jr. and his wife Caroline died in a flying accident. In 2008, she worked with Barack Obama in the US presidential election campaign. Okay, so could you please read yours? Okay, so look at the life of Caroline Kennedy. So she had many tragedies, right? We can see that her father was assassinated when she was only 5 years old, and then she lost her uncle, and then she lost her brother, and then she lost her mother, and years later he lost her brothers. So there are many tragedies, but she still survived, and she is strong enough to deal with the problem. Okay, so you can learn about her life. Now, our lesson come to the end, but I have homework for you. So you have to research information about famous person, live or dead, that interests you. Make note and write a biography. បងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាត្រូវធ្វើការស្រាវជ្រាវទៅលើជីវិតរបស់មនុស្សដែលល្បីល្បាញ អាចថាគាត់នៅរស់ក៏បាន ជាមនុស្សដែលបានស្លាប់ទៅហើយក៏បាន ដែលធ្វើឲ្យបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នានឹងចាប់អារម្មណ៍ចា៎អ្នកណាក៏ដោយឲ្យតែបងប្អូនចាប់អារម្មណ៍គឺបងប្អូន research ពីគាត់ហើយយកមកសរសេរចា៎ហើយយើងបង្កើតជា note បន្ទាប់មកយើងបង្កើតជា note ហើយយើងប្រើប្រាស់ note នោះដើម្បីសរសេរពីជីវប្រវត្តិរបស់គាត់ note នឹងមានអ្វីខ្លះចាមាន name and date of birth ថ្ងៃខែឆ្នាំកំណើត family គ្រួសារចាគ្រួសារគឺរួមទាំងឪពុកទាំងម្ដាយទាំងបងទាំងប្អូនហើយទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងចាទី2គឺ early life ជីវិតរបស់គាត់នៅពេលដំបូងចាអញ្ចឹងយើងអាចរៀបរាប់ពី childhood របស់គាត់មកចាកុមារភាព education and early career ជាងការសិក្សាអប់រំហើយនឹងការងារដំបូងរបស់គាត់ថាគាត់ធ្វើអ្វី marriage and children ស្ថានភាពគ្រួសាររបស់គាត់ហើយនឹងកូនរបស់គាត់ចាយើងអាចបញ្ចូលក្នុងហ្នឹងណាចា later career and role in the public ការងារក្រោយមកហើយនឹងតួនាទីនៅក្នុងមុខងារសាធារណៈចាថាគាត់មានតួនាទីអ្វីទៅក្នុងសង្គមទេហើយបើមានជាអ្វីនិងចំណុចមួយទៀតគឺ that គឺបើសិនជាមនុស្សនោះស្លាប់អញ្ចឹងបងអូនអាចដាក់ថ្ងៃខែឆ្នាំដែលគាត់ស្លាប់ហើយមូលហេតុដែលគាត់ស្លាប់ផងដែរចាមិនត្រឹមតែប៉ុណ្្នឹងទេ You can also include information about success, failure, problem and personal experience during these stages អញ្ចឹងបងអូនអាចរួមបញ្ចូលទាំងព័ត៌មានមួយចំនួនដូចជាភាពជោគជ័យរបស់គាត់ចាហើយនឹងបរាជ័យរបស់គាត់ហើយនឹងបញ្ហាដែលគាត់ជួបប្រទះព្រមទាំងបទពិសោធន៍ដែលគាត់បានជួបប្រទះហើយគាត់បានអនុវត្តនៅតាមដំណាក់កាលនីមួយៗនេះចាដំណាក់កាលពេលកុមារភាពមានអ្វីខ្លះមានបញ្ហាអ្វីទេចាហើយដំណាក់កាលការងាររបស់គាត់ដំបូងហ្នឹងមានបញ្ហាទេឬក៏មានភាពជោគជ័យយ៉ាងណាបងអូនអាចដាក់មកបានណាចាអញ្ចឹងយើងមើលទៅមួយទៀតបន្ទាប់មកគឺបងអូនត្រូវ change your word with your partner read it and then send me both writing and voice recording via Telegram អញ្ចឹងបងអូនត្រូវសរសេរអត្ថបទនឹងហើយចាបងអូនត្រូវផ្ញើទៅកាន់មិត្តភ័ក្តិរបស់បងអូនហើយដើម្បីឲ្យមិត្តភ័ក្តិរបស់បងអូនផ្ញើអ្វីដែលគាត់សរសេរត្រឡប់មកបងអូនវិញបន្ទាប់មកបងអូនត្រូវតែ record ចា record voice មានន័យថាអ្វីដែលបងអូនបានសរសេរហ្នឹងគឺបងអូនសរសេរខ្លួនឯងណាអញ្ចឹង record voice មកហើយផ្ញើមកខ្ញុំតាម Telegram ចាហើយនឹងមួយទៀតគឺសូមកុំភ្លេចបន្តិចទៀតយើងនឹងមានកិច្ចការនៅក្នុង Google Form ដូច្នេះហើយសូមបងអូនធ្វើកិច្ចការនៅក្នុង Google Form ផងដែរចាជាមេរៀនរបស់យើងសន្មតថាដល់ទីបញ្ចប់ខ្ញុំសូមអរគុណសម្រាប់ការយកចិត្តទុកដាក់របស់បងអូននិងសូមបងអូនទាំងអស់គ្នាចូលរួមការពារថែរក្សាសុខភាពរបស់យើងទាំងអស់គ្នាព្រមទាំងអនុវត្តនៅវិធានការ3កុំ3ការពារដើម្បីជៀសឲ្យផុតពីជំងឺ Covid-19 ខ្ញុំសូមអរគុណនិងសូមជម្រាបលា